All right, this lesson is on raster versus vector, and then also this idea of smart objects. The raster image is basically like a photograph. So this is the raster image. This raster image means that it's dependent on the size of it, meaning that if I grab this image and if I make it larger, it is going to degrade in quality. Okay, if I make it smaller, it still will degrade in quality, but it won't be as noticeable because it's going smaller. But when you grow it larger, you get that pixelation, those little kind of square artifacts of an image that you notice that the image doesn't look as high quality. Okay, so that's one of the main characteristics of raster images, is that they degrade the quality based on whether you shrink or you enlarge the size of an image. Okay. The vector image, it's also an image, but it's not a photograph in the sense that it doesn't have that gradation that a photograph usually has. It's what you create in Illustrator. And even if you have like a gradation, like gradient that you apply to it, it's still different because the way that it's been put together, it has more limitations in the amount of gradient it can have. So in a way, it's a simpler format, okay? The key thing about vector shapes, if I created it inside Photoshop, just like I would create it in Illustrator using the pen tools here, and I have some modification tools here that I could use. I created it in Photoshop, and even though Photoshop is by nature a raster program, it does have the capabilities of rendering things in vector and maintaining them in vector, okay? But then we also have the ability to convert it into a raster, which just means transforming the way the information is read and the way that the information and image responds to manipulation, okay? So a vector image allows you to resize infinitely big or infinitely small, infinite amount of times, and the quality never degrades. Just like in Illustrator, you can make a 2-inch image 100 feet tall and then shrink it back to 2 inches, and quality of the image remains the same. There's no pixelation, okay? Now there's this concept of smart object raster, and that means that basically I can take an image like this. I'm going to make a duplicate of it, okay? And here it is. I'm going to move it down. And I can actually turn this into a smart object. To do that, I just got to go into the layer. I right click. I say convert to smart object. You'll notice you get this little icon right here. And that's how I know the difference between this raster version and then this one that's the smart object. Okay, so I'm just going to call this one smart object image. Okay. And basically with this one, once you convert it into a smart object, you can resize it infinitely smaller and back to its original size without any loss of quality. If I go bigger than the original, I'm still going to lose quality, but at least if I go smaller and back to its original size and then smaller and back to its original size, like while I'm determining what size I want something, I will not lose image quality, okay? And then the other type of smart object vector here is basically a vector drawing that I've created in another program. I have the option to import it as a smart object as well. Okay, so I'm going to go into Illustrator, and I've created this drawing here, little wannabe happy face, and I'm just going to edit, copy, and I'm going to go into Photoshop. And this is where it talks about the compatibility of software with other software. It has the ability to integrate other software in here. And when you hit an edit, paste, you can select from different types. And the one that we want to select here is smart object, okay? Some of these right here are basically creating what we already have here. So we're just going to go ahead and hit OK. This is the only one we don't have right now. So we're going to hit OK. And then we're going to go ahead and put it down here. I'm going to hit enter so that it applies it. Anytime you have that constraint box, just hit enter and it'll apply it. And the way that it comes in is it comes in as one flat object. Like basically the whole thing is all stuck together, even though if in Illustrator it was separate pieces. Okay, but the cool thing about this is that even though it appears as a flat object, you can always go into this smart vector and manipulate the colors individually inside of it. It'll take you back to the original Illustrator file. Okay, so just to demonstrate the raster shrinking in size and then enlarging, and so you can see the degradation of quality. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit edit, transform, scale, okay, and I'm going to zoom into it so we can see. I'm going to make it smaller. I'm going to hold down my shift key so that when I constrain the proportions when I'm shrinking down, so it doesn't make it all weird like that or stretchy like that, which is something you want to be careful not to do. I'm going to go shift, hold down. When I'm ready to apply it, I'm just going to hit return, and that means that it's applied the changes. Now, because this is indeed a raster image, when I grow it back up, it's going to be losing quality every time. You'll start seeing pixelation and hit return. I'm going to shrink it again. I'm going to go really small this time. Hit enter. I'm going to hit return again. I'm just transforming using my hand command, Control T on a Mac or Control T on a PC or Command T on a Mac. Now I'm going back up. And you start noticing more of that pixelation coming back. Hit enter. You can start seeing it getting blurry. I'm going to hit return again. Command T. Command T again. Grow it back up. And you can just see how the degradation of quality just happened, okay? We compare it to the original, okay? Even if we were to shrink it back to its more original size, you'd still be able to see that degradation quality between that and that, okay? So that's the thing with the raster image. If you're thinking of playing around with the size, that becomes a problem, okay? Just even shrinking something down and then bringing it back to its original size, it's still going to create a problem, okay? Vector shapes. Vector shapes, I can do the same thing. I'm not going to go to edit, transform. I'm just going to hit Command T, okay, the shortcut for it. I'm going to shrink it down. Hit enter. Go ahead, grow it back up. Hit enter. Shrink it down. Hit enter. Grow it back up. Enter. Shrink it down. Make it teeny tiny. Hit enter. Shrink it back up. Hit enter. You get the idea. Nothing changes, okay? Vectors are independent of resolution. They're going to grow infinitely or shrink infinitely an infinite amount of times, and nothing's going to happen, okay? Now going down to this one down here. Since I've converted it into a smart object, and again, I know it's a smart object because I asked it to be, and I see this little icon here, I can go in here, and as long as I don't make this image larger than the original, everything is fine. I'll still maintain the quality, so I'm going to go really tiny. Okay. I'm going to go back to large. I'm going to go tiny. I'm going to go back to its regular size. And I'm just going to do this a few more times, and you'll get the idea that nothing is changing on it. Okay, so if we look at the comparison, and it's not because this one is smaller, it's just because I converted it into a smart object. As long as I don't go larger than this, then I should be okay. The minute that I do start making the image larger, I am also going to lose pixelation. It's not going to be as drastic though. Okay, so if you're going to be experimenting with your images, if you're not sure if you want to include that picture of that sun or that picture of that moon or whatever it is, and you don't know what size you want it at, then you just want to make sure that you convert it into a smart object, okay? Now, there is some limitations with smart objects. There's certain filters that won't run on it. There's certain tools that won't apply to it. If you're having a hard time with some tool that you know should be working, you may need to convert this into a raster. And to convert it into a raster, you would just right-click that layer, and you would hit rasterize, and then it would just become a normal image. And then you can continue manipulating it, okay? But I'm going to undo. I usually don't suggest that until you're sure that you want something at that certain size, okay? The other reason you use smart objects is when you start running filters like drop shadows and glows and other effects that you have available to you, which we're going to learn in another video. Smart objects allow you to turn off and on the effect and not permanently affect the image. Okay, so just something to keep in mind, and you'll learn more about that in that filters video. All right, so smart vector object, this is basically when you bring in something from another program, and the cool thing about it is if we go here to the to that layer, if you just double click it here, it'll automatically prompt you to open up the original file. And it'll go here. And if you want to go and change something that you originally made in Illustrator and you just copied and pasted it over there, you can change things like the color of the face here and hit OK. And as long as you save it, I just did a quick Command S, okay, or File, Save here. And I'm just going to go ahead and close out of that. Notice now when I come back, it automatically implements that change. And if I want to go ahead and do that again, I can double click it, hit OK, and say I want to change the color of the mouth. And go in here, change the color of the mouth. Command save, close it, come in here, and it just changed the color of the mouth. It automatically implements the changes. And you can resize it infinitely, just like you can a vector object. Okay? So what do you basically need to know? You need to know that your images are naturally going to come in as raster format if you file, open them, and drag them as instructed in the videos on how to import images into your file. Okay? But what you need to keep in mind is that if you're not certain what size you want to use them as, then you're going to want to convert them into smart objects. Okay? And that will allow you to resize and rescale with minimal loss of resolution as long as it's not larger than the original. Okay? Vector objects, you just want to know that this is not a native drawing format for Photoshop. This isn't typically how it works, but it does have the capability to do that. Okay? And then smart objects vector, you just need to know that there is compatibility with other software and that you can get it to integrate nicely and be able to edit the original in the original vector program that you created it in. Okay? So that's basically what you need to know about raster, vector, and smart objects.